Welcome back to Engine Shop Joe. Hope you all had a good week. We're going to continue with features and parameters, and where we left off was at the end of idle speed adjustment, and we're moving on now to after treatment. One thing that I might want to note about the idle speed adjustment from last week is the driver can be going down the road at 1800 RPM. If he's got that set switch off and the cruise switch off and bumps to set or resume, he's changing base idle. He just doesn't know it yet because the engine's not in base idle mode. But once it gets there, it will reflect the changes that he has made. Okay, let's continue on. So as we get started, I'm not sure if I mentioned this or not, but if you're looking at a read-only copy of the parameters, all the toolboxes are locked. If you have a password in the ECM and you don't know it, all the toolboxes are locked. You can't change anything. If your Insight version license expires, you have a Pro license and then you have a basically a basic license. The basic license lasts usually much longer period of time than the Pro license, which is 1 year. So your basic license used to last 5 years. But once your Pro expires, everything in Insight becomes read-only. You can't change anything. You can just view things. So if you go in here and you can't change anything and you can't erase faults, first thing you do is check your licensing. The second thing you do is check and see if there's a password in the ECM. And the customer would know that. They should. A lot of times the big fleets will put passwords in the ECM so that the drivers can't pay somebody to change, something they want changed, like increase the road speed, something like that. Okay, let's get started here. By the way, on the toolboxes, if you see the lock closed, it's locked. If you see the lock open, you can adjust it. When you see the screwdriver, that's the little thing with the blue handle there. If it's leaning to the left, it's locked. If it's leaning to the right, it's unlocked, and the lock will show open. Those are just visuals to let you know that you can change things or you can't. There's nothing you can do to make those lock or unlock. They're locked or unlocked because of the two reasons I already mentioned. So, after treatment. Diesel particulate filter. First one, active regen in PTO and remote modes. That's disabled on this particular vehicle. If you have a truck that runs the PTO all day, say a boom truck, where you've got a crane on the back bed of the truck and the guy drives the truck to the job, and then he sits in that crane most of the day and just lifts up stuff like maybe he's helping putting a roof or roof headers up on a building or AC unit. If this is disabled and he runs all week and he doesn't ever drive the truck out of the job site, you could end up having the DPF plug up. So you may need to enable this so that while he's working in PTO mode, because remember, PTO mode is, we're going to talk about that later, but basically PTO mode is when you have a second throttle pedal somewhere on the machine. Not always true, but in this case, second throttle pedal where the operator's running that pedal and the cab pedal's not being used. That would be called remote PTO, one of the modes anyway. And you would need to enable that. We ran into that where I used to work, where a unit actually, the operator ran it till it locked up, but we had to go down with Insight to unlock it and make some changes. So that's what that is. After treatment, diesel particulate filter stationary regeneration with parking brake. If that's enabled, the operator cannot put the unit into a stationary regen with the parking brake released. This has nothing to do with the engine driving down the road and regenning itself. It has to do with when it's parked and he's going to do a park regeneration. Next is after treatment diesel particulate filter temperature stabilization. I'm not going to spend the time to explain that. I'll just tell you I would enable it, especially if they do a lot of idling. If they start the truck up and run down the freeway all day long, maybe go into a terminal and shut it off, you could disable that if you wanted to. If you're not sure, enable it. It's not going to cause any problems. Next is automotive mobile regeneration. So that has to do with the engine being able to regen itself while it's driving. If you turn that off, the engine can't regenerate itself while it's driving. Underneath that, so you don't want to turn it off. Underneath that is minimum vehicle speed. Those settings change how the vehicle behaves while it's regenning, while it's driving. That's a long explanation. The numbers were settable from 5 to 25 miles an hour. And I would just leave that where it's at. Wherever the OEM set it, leave it there. If you're not sure, set it at 5 miles an hour. Diesel particulate filter lamp. That's the lamp that comes on and tells the driver that he needs to do a stationary regen. Usually it's a blue lamp. You have to tell the ECM that lamp's installed or it won't look to illuminate it. A lot of times freight company trucks won't have that lamp. They don't want the driver messing with any of that stuff. The ECM just take care of everything. If there's a problem, then it just goes in the shop. Next, diesel particulate filter regeneration permit switch. And under that start switch, those are driver operated switches. If they're installed, you have to enable them. And they allow the driver to inhibit regeneration. That's what the permit switch is for. And if the after treatment diesel particulate filter lamp is lit, then the start switch, which is momentary when he presses it, if he's parked with the parking brake on, the engine should go into a stationary regen once he pushes that start switch. The permit switch is there so that if he hauls or delivers where there's a high chance of fire, say he hauls hay and he backs into a hay barn and parks and they're going to load the trailer. Well, you're parked in a hay barn and all of a sudden the engine goes into a regen and you got 1200 degrees coming out the exhaust stack. Probably not a good thing. So that's why the permit switch is there. If the truck has a permit switch, make sure the operator understands that that has to be in the permit or on position. Usually the switch is up is off, middle is on, and then push down is momentary. Or the switch could be put in upside down where up is momentary. The thing is, leave the switch in the middle position, that's on. And that's where it needs to stay unless, again, you're in a place where a regen would cause a hazardous situation. Next, high exhaust temperature, high exhaust system temperature lamp configuration. If you turn that off, the driver will never see hot exhaust on the dash. Some drivers, if they don't understand what that means, they think something's wrong with the engine, it's overheating. It has nothing to do with anything except that the exhaust pipes are hot because the engine is cleaning or has just cleaned the after treatment diesel particulate filter, and it cleans it by making it over 800 or 900 degrees, and that heats all those pipes up. Now, next, why? Think of it this way, active due to regeneration. So a question, why is the exhaust system temperature lamp turned on? It can be turned on due to active regeneration. That's disabled by default. I have enabled that when doing troubleshooting, and I would tell a driver, I want you to tell me whenever that hot light goes on, because that means the engine is in a driving regen. And we would do that where the engine jumping in and out of regen all day too frequently and we end up with fuel in the oil. That would be at a mid-range or the new X15s where they dose fuel by firing an injector on an exhaust stroke. So that's the only time I would enable that. If that's disabled, then the ECM will look at the maximum speed. In this case, it's 5 miles an hour. So if the driver's going 6 miles an hour, that hot light won't be on. Why is it off? Because he's not going to reach out and touch that pipe or bump against it when he's going 6 miles an hour, and neither is anybody else, hopefully, because he's driving. Next, you have active temperature and inactive temperature. So the exhaust in this case has to get to 842 degrees before it will turn that light on. And then when it's cooling down, it has to drop below 824 before it goes off. Those are pretty decent numbers. I just leave them alone and don't mess with that. Let's go ahead and finish SCR this week. Okay, so under the SCR after treatment, we've got after treatment diesel exhaust fluid level system configuration. So that basically means that this has a DEF tank on it, and the ECM needs to be looking at the DEF tank to figure out what the low and high level is. There's a float on there. And then you can set the low level, and notice that's at 13%. And then the exhaust fluid warning level's at 9%. So when that light comes on and tells the driver, hey, the red light's on the gauge and it's showing E, he's still got almost 10% fluid left, because they do not want him driving and not having DEF fluid in there. So by the time he's literally out of DEF fluid, the truck's only going 5 miles an hour. And that's so that he cannot cause an emissions problem with the vehicle. Next is a diesel exhaust fluid heater. And remember, the heaters are either in the tank. It's got a water pipe that goes in there, and there's an OEM valve that turns on and off to heat the tank. And then the lines have heating wire that is formed into the rubber when they form the line. So you can enable the heater configuration. Why would you want to disable it? Well, maybe this engine is put in a machine that's inside of a building, and the tank's always in a heated building, and so are the lines. So you turn all this off. You don't need it. But if it's going down the road, or you're not in Florida all the time, you're going to want to enable this. Diesel exhaust fluid system heating type, electric with heated connectors. So there are some different types on the newer engines. I'm not going to go into that here. Diesel exhaust fluid line heater 1 relay, diesel exhaust fluid tank heater 1 relay. You have to tell the ECM that it's controlling those relays, and it needs to know that so that it actually enables a relay when it comes time and it needs it. Okay, we're going to stop there, and thanks for bearing with me on this. I know this is hard to watch sometimes, but this is important to know, because if you said it wrong, it's big problems. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you again next week on Engine Shop Joe.